March 6, 1902, Volume 4. Jesus is stripped of every principality, of every regime, of every sovereignty. This morning my adorable Jesus, on coming, made himself seen all naked, as though trying to cover himself in my interior, telling me, "My daughter, they have stripped me of every principality, of every regime, of every sovereignty. And in order to reacquire these rights of mine over creatures, it is necessary that I strip them and almost destroy them. Through this they will recognize that where God is not present as principle, as regime, and as sovereign, everything leads to their own destruction, and therefore to the font of all evils." March 6, 1903, Volume 4. The meaning of the words Ecce, homo. After I had struggled very much, blessed Jesus made himself seen within my interior, telling me, "Shall we go see whether creatures want me?" And I, "Surely they must want you, because you are the most lovable being. Who would have the daring of not wanting you?" And he, "Let us go, and then you will see what they do." So we went, and as we arrived at a place in which there were many people, his head came out from within my interior, and he said those words which Pilate spoke when he showed him to the people, "Ecce homo," here is the man. I understood that the meaning of those words was to ask them whether they wanted the Lord to reign as their king, and to have dominion in their hearts, minds, and works. And they answered, "Take him away, we do not want him, or rather crucify him, so that every memory of him may be destroyed." Oh, how many times these scenes are repeated! So the Lord said to everyone, "Ecce homo." As he said it, a murmuring, a confusion arose. Some were saying, "I do not want him as my king. I want riches." Another, pleasure. Another, honor. Some, dignities. And some, many other things. I listened to those voices with horror, and the Lord told me, "Have you seen how no one wants me? Yet this is nothing. Let us turn to the religious class, and let us see whether they want me." So I found myself in the midst of priests, bishops, religious women, and devout ones, and with sonorous voice Jesus repeated, "Ecce homo." And they said, "We want him, but we also want our comfort." Others, "We want him, but together with our own interests." Others answered, "We want him, but together with esteem and honor." What does a religious do with esteem? Others replied, "We want him, but together with some satisfaction from creatures. How can one live alone and without anyone that satisfies us?" Some wanted satisfaction at least in the sacrament of confession, but almost no one wanted him alone, nor was someone lacking who did not care about Jesus Christ at all. So all afflicted, he told me, "My daughter, let us withdraw. Have you seen how no one wants me? Or at the most they want me together with something that pleases them. I am not content with this, because true reigning is when one reigns alone." As he was saying this, I found myself inside myself. March 6, 1915, Volume 11. Divine justice does not want Luisa to be bound to the state of suffering as a victim, so as to continue to give course to chastisements and intensify the war. As I was in my usual state, my always adorable Jesus came for a little while. Since my confessor was not well, and therefore my state had been interrupted, that is, when I used to come round at the call of obedience, I said to Jesus, "What do you want me to do? Should I stay, or should I try to come round when I feel free?" And Jesus, "My daughter, do you perhaps want me to operate as before, when I not only commanded you to remain still, but I also tied you in such a way that you could not come round, if not for obedience? If I did this now, my love would be constrained, and my justice would find an obstacle in pouring itself out completely upon creatures. And you might say to me, just as you keep me tied as victim of suffering for love of you and for the creatures, I tie you so as to stop your justice from pouring itself out upon creatures. So should everything be compromised, the wars and the preparations that other nations are making to go to war? I can't. At the most, if you want to remain tied, or if the confessor wants to keep you so, if you do, I will have some regard for Curato, and I will save something. But in the meantime things get tighter, and my justice does not want you in this state of appeasement at all, in order to soon send more chastisements, make other nations go to war, and to lower the pride of creatures who will find defeats where they believe to find victories. Alas, my love cries, but my justice demands satisfaction. My daughter, patience." After he said this, he disappeared. But who can say how I remained? I felt like dying, because I thought that if I had left that state of immobility and suffering by myself, I might have been the cause of an increase in chastisements and for the entrance of other nations into the war, especially of Italy. What a pain! What a heartbreak! I felt all the weight of this suspension from Jesus. I thought to myself, who knows if Jesus is not permitting the confessor to become well in order to give the final blow and make Italy enter the war? How many suspicions and fears! As I came out of the state of the usual morning suffering by myself, I spent a day of tears and intense bitterness. March 6, 1919, Volume 12. Different steps that Jesus takes in the soul to make her live in the divine will. I was all concerned about what my sweet Jesus keeps telling me on the divine volition, and I said to myself, how is it possible that the soul can reach such a point, to live more in heaven than on earth? And Jesus, on coming, told me, "My daughter, that which is impossible to the creature is possible to me. It is true that this is the greatest prodigy of my omnipotence and of my love. But when I want, I can do anything, and what appears to be difficult is very easy for me. However, I want the yes of the creature, and for her to be available, like soft wax, for whatever I want to make of her. Even more, you must know that before calling her definitively to live in my volition, I call her every now and then. I strip her of everything. I make her undergo a sort of judgment, because in my will there are no judgments. Things remain fully confirmed with me. Judgment is outside of my will. But whatever enters into my will, who can ever dare to place it under judgment? I never judge myself. Not only this, but many times I make her die corporally also, and then I give her life again. And the soul lives as if she were not living. Her heart is in heaven, and living is her greatest martyrdom. How many times have I not done this with you? These are all preparations in order to dispose the soul to live in my will. And then the chains of my graces, of my repeated visits, how many have I not given you? Everything was to dispose you to the height of living in the immense sea of my will. Therefore do not want to investigate, but continue your flight. March 6, 1926, Volume 19. Only the most important thing was known about the celestial Mama, that the Son of God was her Son. The same will happen with the daughter of the divine will. The most important thing only will be known, so as to make the divine will known. A good which is not known has no ways to communicate itself. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus came, and holding my hand in his, he drew me to himself, up high between heaven and earth. Almost fearing, I clung to Jesus, holding on tightly to his most holy hand, and wanting to pour out my pain with him, which so much oppresses me, I said to him, "My love and my life, Jesus, some time ago you told me that you wanted to make of me a copy of my celestial Mama, yet almost nothing was known about her, of the many seas of grace with which, in every instant, she was inundated by you. She said nothing to no one. She kept everything within herself, nor does the Gospel say anything. It is known only that she was your Mama, and that she gave you, eternal Word, to the world. But everything that passed between you and her, the favors, the graces, she kept all within herself. With me, then, you want the opposite. You want me to manifest what you tell me. You do not want the secret of what passes between you and me. I feel sorrow because of this. Where, then, is the copy you want to make between me and my Mama?" And my sweet Jesus, clasping me tightly to his heart, all tenderness told me, "My daughter, courage, do not fear. Nothing was known about my Mama but that which it was necessary and sufficient to be known, that I was her Son, that through her I came to redeem the generations, and that she was the first one in whose soul I had my first field of divine actions. Everything else, the favors and the seas of graces which she received, remained in the sacrarium of the divine secrets. However, the most important, the greatest, the holiest thing was indeed known, that the Son of God was her Son. This was the greatest honor for her, which raised her above all creatures. Therefore, since the greatest was known about my Mama, the lesser was not necessary. The same will happen with my daughter. It will be known only that my will had its first field of divine action in your soul, as well as everything that is necessary in order to make known what regards my will, how it wants to enter the field so that the creature may return to her origin, and how it anxiously awaits her into its arms, so that there may be no more division between her and me. If this were not made known, how could creatures long for this great good? How could they dispose themselves to receive a grace so great? If my Mama had not wanted to make known that I was the eternal Word and her Son, what good would redemption have produced? A good which is not known, as great as it may be, has no ways to communicate the good it possesses. And just as my Mama was not opposed, so must my daughter not oppose what regards my will. All the rest of the secrets, the flights you do in my will, the goods you take, and the most intimate things between you and me, will remain in the sacrarium of the divine secrets. Do not fear, your Jesus will content you in everything. March 6, 1931, Volume 29. How only Jesus was the author of her state of sufferings, and because they forced him to, he has permitted a pause. How in God there is absolute rest. Outside of God, work. I continue to live amid the bitternesses of my present state. The thought that blessed Jesus is making scourges pour down, and that peoples remain naked and starving, tortures me. And to think that my beloved and highest good, Jesus, has remained alone in his suffering, and I am no longer together with him in his pains. Oh, how it torments me. It seems to me that Jesus is all attention over me so as not to let me fall into sufferings as before. Even more, he hides all the pains within himself to leave me free. And in seeing me afflicted, it seems to me that his intense love makes him put his pains aside to pay attention to my affliction. And he says to me, "Good daughter, my daughter, courage. Your Jesus still loves you. In nothing has my love for you decreased. And this, because it was not you who refused me the suffering. No, my daughter would never have done this. They forced you to, and I, in order to give you peace and to make them see that it was really I who kept you in that state of suffering for so many years. It was neither illness nor any other natural cause, but my paternal goodness that wanted to have one who would make up for my pains on earth, and these for the good of all. And now that they have forced you, and have forced me also with their impositions, I made it cease completely, giving you a break. This says in clear notes that only your Jesus was the author of your state, but I cannot hide my sorrow. It is so great that I can say that in the whole history of the world I have never received a similar sorrow from creatures. My heart is so grieved and torn by this sorrow that I am forced to hide from you the deep gash, so as not to embitter you more. And then to see the indifference of some, and you know who they are, as if they had done nothing to me, increases my sorrow, and they force my justice to continue to pour the scourges. And I will continue, my daughter, to pour the chastisements. I told you this before, that if even just 1 month would pass of my keeping you suspended from your state of suffering, they will hear and see how many chastisements will pour down over the face of the earth. And while my justice does its course, we will occupy ourselves together with my divine will, I making it known to you, and you receiving the good of its knowledges, because each knowledge brings the growth of the life of my will in you. And for each act of yours done in new knowledge, my fiat gains more ground in your soul, and extends more its kingdom in it. More so, since creatures have no power to enter into my divine will, to disturb us, and dictate to us the law. Therefore we are free to do whatever we want. We have absolute freedom. Therefore be attentive to continue to cross its interminable seas. Then while he was saying this, I felt my little intelligence being transported into an abyss of inaccessible light. This light concealed all the joys, all the beauties. In appearance it seemed to be light, but looking inside there was no good that it did not possess. And my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, our divine being is most pure light, light that contains everything, fills everything, sees everything, does everything, light such that no one can arrive at seeing where our boundaries reach, its height and depth. The creature gets lost within our light because she does not find its shore, its port, in order to get out. And if the creature takes from this light of ours, they are just little drops that serve her to fill herself completely with light, to the point of overflowing outside. But our light does not decrease because the creature has taken from our own, but is replaced instantly by the resurrective virtue of our light. So our Supreme Being is always at one level in perfect balance. We can give as much as we want if we find souls who want to take from our own without losing anything. Even more, if we find one who wants to take, we set to work. In fact, you must know that within us there is perfect rest, nor do we have anything to do. There is nothing to remove or to place. Our happiness is full and complete. Our joys are always new. Our one and only will, as acting in us, gives us the perfect rest of the beatitudes of our divine being that has no beginning and will have no end. So, this abyss of light that you see contains an abyss of joy, of power, of beauty, of love, and so on. And we, while delighting, rest in them, because only when nothing is lacking and there is nothing to add, then can it be called true and absolute rest. On the other hand, outside of our divinity, our work comes out into the field, and this field is the creatures. Our very divine qualities that inside of us give us rest, outside of ourselves give us to work. And now we make our will work for the good of creatures. That divine fiat that we put out in the field in creation, from which all things came out, never desists from its work. It works incessantly. It works by preserving everything. It works for it wants to be known, for it wants to reign. It works in issuing more souls to the light of the world, and forms its admirable designs to carry out its work, and to have the occasion to always work. It works in withdrawing souls into the bosom of eternity. We can call our divine will the all-doer that never spares its continuous work, even for the good of those who do not recognize it. Our love works, our mercy, our power works, and also our justice works for the good of creatures. Otherwise our Supreme Being would not be a balanced and perfect being, but would show weakness as if our justice were put aside, leaving it aside when there is all the reason for it to do its punishing course. See, then, our work is the creatures, because having issued them from within our ardor of love, our love leads us to work in order to always love them. Because if our work ceased, love would cease, and creation would resolve into nothing. March 6, 1932, Volume 30. One who lives in the divine will feels the need to go around the divine works, and how all the divine works go around the creature. The purpose, seed of light. I was continuing my round in the divine works. I feel my poor mind as though fixed around the works of my Creator, and it does its race, almost continuous, around them. In fact, since they are works done for love of me, I feel the duty to recognize them, to use them as stairways in order to ascend to He who so much loved me and loves me, and to give Him my little love, because He wants to be loved. But while I was doing this, I thought to myself, and why does my mind have to always run? It seems to me that a powerful force is over me, maintaining my race. And my sweet Jesus, making me his tiny little visit, told me, My daughter, everything goes around the creature. The heavens go around, and do not let her escape from under their azure vault. The sun goes around, and with its little rounds of light, it gives her light and heat. The water goes around the creature, the fire, the air, the wind, and each element gives her the properties it contains. My very life and all my works are in continuous round around the creatures, to be in continuous act of giving myself to them. Even more, you must know that as soon as a baby is conceived, my conception goes around the conception of the baby, to form him and keep him defended. And as he is born, my birth places itself around the newborn, to go around him and give him the helps of my birth, of my tears, of my wailings, and even my breath goes around him to warm him. The newborn does not love me, though unconsciously, and I love him to folly. I love his innocence, my image in him. I love what he must be. My steps go around his first vacillating steps in order to strengthen them, and they continue to go around until the last step of his life, to keep his steps safe within the round of my steps. In sum, my works go around his works, my words around his, my pains around his pains, and when he is about to breathe the last breath of his life, my agony goes around him as support of his own, and my death, with unconquerable strength, goes around to give him unexpected helps, and with jealousy all divine it presses itself around him, so that his death may not be death, but true life for heaven. And I can say that even my resurrection goes around his sepulchre, waiting for the propitious time in order to call, by the empire of my resurrection, his resurrection to the body, to immortal life. Now all the works that have come out of my will, all of them go round and round. For this purpose they were created. To stop means to have no life, and not to produce the fruit established by us, which cannot be, because the divine being knows not how to do either dead works or works without fruit. So one who enters into my divine will takes her place in the order of creation, and feels the need to go around together with all created things. She feels the necessity to make her rapid rounds around my conception, my birth, my tender age, and everything I did upon earth. And the beauty of it is that while she goes around all our works go around her. In some, they compete in going around each other. But this is all the effect and fruit of my divine will, such that, since it is continuous motion, one who is in it feels the life of its motion, and therefore the need to run together with it. Even more I tell you, if you do not feel the continuous race of going around our works, it is a sign that your life is not permanent in my will, but you make some exits, some little escapes, and therefore the race ceases because the one who gives it the life of running is missing. And as you enter into it, so it puts you in the order, and you continue the race, because another will, divine and operating, has entered into you. Therefore be attentive, because you have to deal with an omnipotent will which always runs and embraces everything. After this I was thinking to myself, what will be the good, the utility of this race of mine, of this going round and round in the acts of the divine will? And the celestial King Jesus added, My daughter, you must know that each active creature contains the value of the purpose with which she animates her act. The purpose is like the seed which, buried under the earth, pulverizes with the earth, yet not in order to die, but to be reborn and form the little plant loaded with branches, with flowers and fruits that belong to that seed. The seed cannot be seen. It is hidden in its little plant, but from the fruits one knows the seed, whether it is good or bad. Such is the purpose. It is seed of light, and it can be said that it remains as though buried, and it pulverizes in the act of the creature. And if the purpose is holy, all the acts that come from that purpose will all be holy acts, because there is the first purpose, the first seed that animates and gives life to the sequence of the acts of the first purpose. And these acts form the life of the purpose, and in them appear flowers and fruits of true sanctity. And as long as the creature, with full knowledge of her will, does not destroy the original purpose, she can be sure that her acts are enclosed in the first purpose. Now, your race in my divine will have the purpose that you want, that its kingdom be formed, and therefore all its acts are centralized in my fiat, and converting into seed of light, they all become acts of my will, that eloquently, with ancient and divine voices, ask for this kingdom so holy into the midst of the human generations. March 6, 1937, Volume 34. Creation, first means of help in order to form the life of the divine will in us. Second, God directly. Third, the circumstances of life. I continued to swim in the immense sea of the divine volition, and I thought to myself, but how can the creature form this life of the fiat in herself? I feel so tiny that it seems impossible to me. Perhaps living within it is easier because I find so much space that I cannot see where the end reaches. But enclosing it within me, I feel that the space is lacking for me in order to do this. And my always lovable Jesus, with his usual goodness, told me, "My daughter, you must know that our power is so much that we take delight in forming our life in the littleness of the creature, provided she is not encumbered by other things that do not belong to us. Rather, many times we operate the greatest things over pure nothing. And since it is our will that this life of our volition is formed and possessed in her soul, everything that we have created and that exists in heaven and on earth have the mandate from us that everything must help and serve the creature as means in order to form and grow this life in her. In fact, the first that lent itself to communicating and to making felt the power, the love of our will, is the whole creation. It has the virtue given by us that while it grows, nourishes, helps, and sustains the natural life, so penetrating into the interior of the soul through the human acts, they penetrate into the soul and they do double office. And if they find the little life of my own will that finds itself in created things kisses my own will that it finds in her. It molds her, blows on her, enlarges the capacity, and finding its little paradise, it rests and administers the helps, the means, that the created thing contains in order to have that nothing be lacking, so as to let the life of my will in the creature grow and be maintained. Therefore the sky is always extended over her head, in order to keep watch over her, so that nothing would enter that was not will of God. The sun approaches even more, and displaying more in love, it makes its heat felt. It fills the eye with light. It invests her hands in steps, hand penetrating into the soul. It fills her with love, with light, with the fecundity of which it is filled by my will, and it leaves the deposit of its heat, of its light, so that she would not live except with love and light, things that belong to my will. And this sun, making its course, forms the beautiful flowerings, the variety of the colors, and all the rest, for love of the one who possesses my will. One can say that every time the sun invests the creature, my will visits the creature in order to see if she needs something, to see if nothing is lacking to her in order to make its life grow in her. What have I not done and would I not do in order to have the intent of forming this life of my fiat in the creature? Therefore the air, while it serves in order to give the breath to the body, it serves to give the breath of my will to the soul. The wind, while it serves to purify the air of nature, it serves to give the caresses, the kisses, the empire of my will to my life that she possesses. In fact, there is no created thing that, releasing my will from inside of them, it does not run within the interior of the soul for help, defense, and in order to let her grow as I want her to. But this is not everything. My will in created things was veiled, in order to form this, its life in them. But how many do not receive it, and it remains veiled, repressed, without being able to give the goods that it possesses. Now there is the second way, more splendid, more displaying of love. It is so much love that it burns us. The desire that we want the creature possesses our will as life, because every act, thought, word, heartbeat, work, and step that she does is a divine emanation that we make her. Our divine being runs in each of her acts in order to give her of ours. We surround her. We vivify her in order to let her be reborn in our will. We can say that we place ourselves at her disposition in order to form this life. But do you know the reason for so much interest of ours? Because we want that our will forms the beautiful generation of the divine will in the will of the creature, and then we will have many lives of ours that love us, that glorify us. How beautiful will creation be! Everything will be ours. We will find our throne, our palpitating life everywhere. Now, there is the third way, the circumstances of life, the occasions, the order of my providence around each one, the mortifications, the sorrows. They are all means in order to make grow and develop, in an admirable way, this life of my will in them. Therefore there is nothing in which it does not prepare its first act of life to give to the creatures. Oh, if everyone would pay attention, how happy and secure they would feel under the reign of a volition so holy that loves them so much that it arrives at the excess of wanting to form its life in the poor creature. March 6, 1938, Volume 35. Oppressions and melancholies have no reason to exist in the divine will. They form the clouds and the bitter little drops that embitter God and the creature. Prodigies of abandonment in the divine volition. How all created things remain animated by one who lives in the fiat. The sea of the divine volition never ceases to plunge me inside its waves, as if it wanted nothing to enter into me other than its light, growing in me through light and heat and the life of its will. But in spite of everything I felt oppressed, with an air of melancholy, for the circumstances, alas, too painful, of my poor existence down here. They formed clouds around me as if to prevent me from enjoying the beauty of the light and the gentleness of the warmth in which the soul remains fecundated, reborn, and growing within her very Creator. And my sweet Jesus, who jealously watches over my poor soul, all goodness told me, my good daughter, courage! The oppressions, the melancholies, and the thoughts of the past have no reason to exist for one who lives in my will. These are notes that clash with my notes of joy, peace, and love, and form feeble sounds that sound awful to our divine ears. They are like bitter little drops that, thrown into our divine sea, try to embitter it, while by living in our will we make the creature the owner of our seas of joy and happiness, and if necessary we arm her with our power, so that all may be propitious, and nothing may do any harm, since nothing has power against our will. Even more, our will has the power to flatten and to crush anything, like dust under the empire of an impetuous wind. How bad it sounds to us when we notice that a creature in our will is afflicted or oppressed, and since she lives in our volition, from the one will that animates us, we are forced to hear her afflictions and oppressions. Setting ourselves aside when the creature feels afflicted is not of our divine being, not of our love. Rather we make use of our power, and we inundate her more with our love, so that we may see her again with a smile on her lips and with joy inside her heart. And then the thought of the past is really absurd. It is like wanting to claim divine rights. You must know that all the beautiful and good things that the creature has done are deposited inside ourselves, attesting to her love and the glory she gives us, and forming her crown for her first entrance into our celestial fatherland. Therefore, the most beautiful act of the creature is to throw herself into our arms, abandon herself, letting us make whatever we want to make of her, in time as well as in eternity. Only then do we get all the savor of making her one of the most beautiful statues to adorn our celestial Jerusalem. Then he added, my daughter, when the creature abandons herself in our will, our satisfaction is so great that she pours into us and we pour into her, giving her our new life, new love, new sanctity, and new knowledge of our Supreme Being. When the creature abandons herself in our divine volition, we can make the greatest prodigies and the most surprising graces in her, since our own will receive and deposit what we want to give to the creature. By abandoning herself in our will, she storms heaven, and her empire is such that she imposes herself over our divine being, enclosing it within her littleness, while she, triumphant, encloses herself within our divine womb. The heavens are amazed, and the angels and the saints remain ecstatic. All feel a new life flowing within themselves by virtue of the act of abandonment of the creature while still a pilgrim. And finding her abandoned in our Fiat, we find that we can do whatever we want. She lends herself completely to our power. So we begin the work and form in the soul many little fountains of love, goodness, sanctity, mercy, and so on. In this way, when our love wants to love, we set those little fountains of love in motion with our omnipotent breath, and she loves us, letting so much love overflow from the font as to float the entire celestial court. When we want to use goodness, mercy, or grace, we set these fonts in motion, and the earth remains floated by our goodness and mercy, and some are converted, some receive graces. We could do all this directly by ourselves, but we feel more delighted and pleased in using the fonts that we ourselves have formed inside the creature. Through her, we feel more moved to use our mercy toward all. We have our intermediary between heaven and earth, who in her abandon makes us pour graces, and makes us love all the creatures with new love. Therefore, the more you are abandoned in our will, the more magnanimous we will be toward you and toward others. And all, at least the more disposed, will find new strength and new guidance. I remained surprised, and he added, "My good daughter, how I wish that all knew what it means to live in my divine volition. It seems incredible, but do you know why? Because they don't know what my will is, and the whole series of prodigies that it can do and wants to do in the creature. So not knowing it, they believe it's impossible that my will can do in the creature all that I'm saying. Oh, if they knew it! What it does and says is little. It is the knowledge that puts us on the way to the creature and prepares our place, forming the space in which to put our unheard-of prodigies. It is knowledge that forms the eyes to be able to view and appreciate our divine wonders. All is a prodigy for one who lives in our will. You must know that as a creature does her acts in my will, all created things remain animated by her will and word. All things possess a voice. Some say love, some glory, some adoration, some others thank you, and others still blessing to our Creator. What harmony they form in the atmosphere! What a sweet enchantment, to such extent that we feel enraptured. But whose voices are these? The voices of those who live in our will. It happens, as when voices and chants are ingeniously enclosed inside instruments of wood and of metal. The instruments sing and speak. It is the same for the one who lives in my will. Her love to see me loved and glorified is such that she encloses her will, her voice, and her love inside the created thing. And some narrate to me the story of my love, some sing of my glory. It seems that all things have one thing to tell me. Oh, how happy I feel, seeing that the creature masters the entire creation, and queen as she is, animates all, and makes me loved by all. Oh, how sweetly she resounds to our divine hearing. I gave her all, and she gives me all, so I return all again." End of March 6th. Fiat.